Welcome to week 4 of How China Works. We're almost halfway done with the crash course part of our series. Can you believe it, Brendan?
It is pretty crazy. Time is flying by, and we're going to pivot again, as the kids like to say these days, to a week of shows all about the working world here.
We'll talk about how the corporate culture in China got its start, how it is influenced by traditional values, and how it's evolving in real time.
Today we'll talk about 3 unique styles that you see in different corporate cultures here that will both validate some assumptions you have, as well as possibly blow your mind a little bit. A preview is that one of them is pretty enlightened, another is straightforward and practical, if not exactly warm and fuzzy, and the last one is super gangsta. It's a lot to process, but we'll lay it all out there for you as best we can.
Later this week, we'll discuss startups and their 996 working style, plus look at those aspects of modern Chinese business that will be super useful to anyone trying to work in or with the Middle Kingdom.
Like a friend of mine told me the other day, I really wish I'd had all this information before coming to China for the first time. And I'm still learning a lot as we do our research here myself, so hopefully you are too.
All right, let's fight.
I see what you did there.
Come on.
All right, first let's pick up with that notion about corporate culture being traditional values-based here. What's the background, Ying?
Okay, to understand this, you have to remember that corporate culture in China really only started in the early 1980s. After the opening up of 78, people here brought in the management styles they learned from the United States and used them as a template for how to operate. This tradition lasted for a long time, as local companies here only recently stopped mainly using the US uniform management style and developed their own within the last 10 years.
And as everyone who looks at this can see, things have now shifted to a new era. What's typical in the present day is a blend of old-school Confucianist traditions combined with the planned market economy approach that was modified from the Western version, and that has created several unique styles of corporate culture here. Let's talk briefly about each of them.
The first style is called 中庸, or in English called being modest and balanced. It's maybe the most mainstream Chinese way of working in a corporate environment and living in China. There is a focus on respecting wisdom. The yin-yang model of reciprocity applies here. The challenge is that as the millennial post-90s generation comes of age in the corporate world, they sometimes find it's hard to give information to and communicate with their older generation bosses who embody 中庸. Two people who came of age in such different times are not easy to get in line with each other because of cultural shifting.
This is the one that I said earlier is probably the most enlightened. Now, of course, I'm projecting my own Western overlays on this, but this approach does seem the most Chinese to me anyway. What's the next one?
The next one is a little darker, and it's called wolf culture, or 狼文化 in Chinese.
No, I know this one. Huawei is said to embrace wolf culture.
That's right. Wolf culture is characterized by its emphasis on authority. Wolf culture companies are very militaristic and focus on relentless fighting and value granting hard work for its own sake above pretty much all else, besides result, of course.
And while that one can get sort of heavy, it's this last one that is more than a little bit freaky to me. It might come as a shock to Westerners that such a philosophy as we're going to describe can exist in the corporate world at all, as it seems more like the domain of crime organizations and cults, which maybe it's not that much of a surprise, actually. What's it called in Chinese, Ying?
Well, the last one is called 厚黑学, which stands for a thick black philosophy.
I am shocked and have no official comments.
Hey, that's my line. This idea comes from the writer Li Zongwu, who published in a philosophical paper in 1911. A revolution had just started after overthrow of the Qing dynasty, and there was chaos in the air. The 厚黑学 philosophy is to attain success at any, and I do mean any, cost, whether through deception or trickery or worse. It gets super heavy, as you might say.
Yeah, I am not easily shocked, but this really smacks of the dark arts here. It's the Luciferian principle in action, actually, with a very serious worship your dark lord vibe throughout the material. What companies adhere to this philosophy, Ying?
Well, it's actually not any one company exactly, but this is more of a hidden attitude that runs deep throughout Chinese working culture. It kicks in when people are pushed into a survival mode and need to, quote-unquote, kill or be killed.
You know, it's funny because we knew about the situation in Hollywood for decades, but before the mega creepiness of Kevin Spacey was publicly revealed, House of Cards was a massive hit here, just like everywhere else. And it's possible that that show, which demonstrated this thick black principle in action every week, resonated here so well in part because of the unspoken but well-known existence of this idea.
Now we can compare and contrast those styles with a more modern model inspired by the best of Silicon Valley. Google's "Oh, don't be evil" model is typical of the public attitude of these companies.
Yeah, although in light of recent revelations, that motto should maybe be changed to "Don't get caught being evil."
Alright, some Chinese examples that are most resonant with the West include Xiaomi. Their culture is all about being fast and providing affordable but good stuff.
Another one is Alibaba. It's been well promoted that Jack Ma built his kingdom in part because he wasn't afraid to break the accepted mold of a corporate executive here. For instance, instead of taking fancy exec lunches like many of his peers at other companies would, he was known for often just eating a simple bowl of instant noodles at his desk while he kept on working like any other employee. Now, how much of this is apocryphal, we may never really know, but the fact that this is the official story they very much wanted out there in the first place says a lot about their corporate culture regardless. And since they were one of the most successful companies on the planet, it's probably worth paying attention to.
I agree. Bloomberg News did an article with this quote about him.
Oh, right. It said, Ma wasn't just successful. He broke the mold for China's business leaders, typically faceless chiefs running mammoth state-owned enterprises like PetroChina and China Mobile. He dressed up like Michael Jackson and tried the moonwalk. I remember that. He wore a 3-foot feather mohawk and makeup to perform at a company party. That's maybe a little unfortunate, but still kind of funny. And he dispensed Yoda-like axioms that were collected in dozens of management books, end quote. Now, there's a lot of pride in people being considered an OG in Western culture, but Jack Ma is a Chinese Nuji, and that's maybe the very best kind.
And Jack Ma's Alibaba culture is to a big extent shaped by Jin Yong, who was the most legendary Chinese hero culture icon. He was a Chinese wuxia novelist, which has a focus on martial arts and chivalry. Jack Ma revered him above all others, and the influence of Jin Yong on Alibaba cannot be overstated.
Jin Yong passed away a couple of weeks before Stan Lee died, actually, and in Chinese media, they were compared to each other quite often after the fact. From what you've told me about him, I can see why.
It's also worth noting that some prominent Chinese companies have been facing criticism for not caring enough about social impact. Chinese netizens really gave companies a public fight when they don't agree with the policies or the corporate actions.
Right. Didi dealt with this a lot recently. A handful of violent crimes from a relatively few drivers prompted a shutdown of the service at night for a whole week so that they could retool their systems and look for issues. Can you imagine if Uber went offline for a week at night?
Wow.
They've been changing their corporate culture as a direct result of their very public problems, but the issue isn't that they didn't have a strong ethical center in the first place, right?
Yes, they are an example of a two-faced problem. Some companies might have a solid foundational philosophy guiding them, but their mission statement isn't always adhered to by the employees who are charged with carrying it out. A company can delete improper internet posts or say sorry after employee misdeeds, but the perceptual damage is already done, and by then it's too late.
Preach it, Ying Ying.
I think that's actually enough preaching for today.
Well, okay then. So the thing we should end on here is this idea that we're witnessing a shift in the public accountability department for Chinese companies. They're facing more pressure than ever before from social media to improve their corporate cultures. Some of them have suffered as a result of being slow to act, while others are making changes proactively now.
Yep, the day of reckoning is already here for some companies, but for all the rest, winter is coming.
As China goes through the growing pains of this particular piece of the growth cycle, we're really at an inflection point in the narrative.
The present moment provides an opportunity for companies to really ponder their values and for outsiders to help influence and facilitate this change and embrace diversity and inclusion so that they can truly go global.
So if your company needs help getting jiggy with the post woke era, feel free to get at me and give us all your money and we'll be glad to help you do it.
I'm not exactly sure what you just said here, but it sounded fun.
Could be. I'm Brendan Davis.
And I'm Ying Ying Li. See you tomorrow on How China Works.